My altar begins with a simple, cheap folding chair. It includes a big ball, an angry cat, this one is stuffed because I didn't have a live trained cat handy, a sharp knife, and a little diamond. These objects are all shared in my community, often the first thing that people experience. But of course, the ball, the knife, the cat, and the diamond are not physically there. They are created and passed around a circle full of people who agree to their reality. Each person in turn interacts with the sharp knife or the angry cat appropriately, as if it were a real thing in their hands, and then they pass it on, making clear to the next person what they're holding, and then let that person take it on as a reality in their own hands. This altar is in honor of the improv community I experienced in Omaha, Nebraska, and it begins with the ball game. The ball game is one of the first exercises that teaches students how to enter into new reality together and how to play well. My experiences in both improv classes and in performances keep coming to mind as I read Tending the Fire That Burns at the Center of the World. David White explains the importance of creation and response and action to the world around us. He says, doxological glory must not be seen as a static event, but as manifest and flow of giving and receiving gifts. This description characterizes the entire cosmos as properly liturgical and doxological in its mutual receiving and giving. Improv is an art form in which every new game is communal creation, giving and receiving. Whether it's long form or short form, the art form only occurs when each player embraces the reality they are given and adds to it with their own offering. I took classes for 3 years, training in both long form improv of Second City, Upright Citizens Brigade, everything that led to SNL, and then short form, think of Whose Line Is It Anyway? These classes were in 2 different theaters with 2 very different cultures. One was family friendly and the other was not. And the people within the classes spanned all age groups and income levels and political leanings. They were there for different reasons and very diverse, but in all of it, there is a clear culture and clear rules and boundaries for improv participants. And so we come to a second altar of physical, real objects that represents that culture. It's a culture that still forms me as a pastor, as a leader, and as a player in the world. We still have the chair. It's foundational to any improv stage. We can create rooms and boxes and doors, but you need something to sit on because squatting is not practical. That chair may become a couch or a boat or a car, but the cheap folding chair is foundational. And a foundational rule of improv is this: yes and. You've probably heard it before. Yes and means you say yes to what anyone on stage is saying, you accept their reality, and then you join in. You pull up a chair and play. In improv, you never negate what a scene partner creates. If they're afraid of the elephant behind you, you turn around and see a scary elephant, and then you give them something back. Yes, that elephant is huge and scary, and let's hide in this old tent, quick, zip it up. The yes part of improv sounds simple, but it's often our biggest obstacle in all parts of life. Improv requires you to let go of your own reality, to let go of control, and to embrace what the people around you have to offer. And that is hard. It's a great thing to practice. On my altar are also a bottle of water and a cheap beer. The beer is on the ground because that's where beer bottles always ended up, under the chairs in improv clubs. Water is a basic need for anyone who's just talking under bright lights. It's great to stay hydrated so you don't lose your voice. But the cheap beer is a staple for every low-budget improv club. It helps the audience to loosen up, to laugh more, and is often a well-earned reward or consolation for performers after a good or bad show. And you know what? Improv requires you to create a safe place for yourself and everyone around you. You can push boundaries, but you always protect one another. Even in the world of water and beer, there's clear rules of respect. We laugh with people, not at them. You always mock up, not down. You avoid political divisions. And everyone should feel free to laugh, but never feel made fun of. Because even while drinking beer, you preserve the dignity of others, and you honor one another both on and off stage. Along those same lines, I have gum. Before going on stage, every improv team I performed with had mints or gum passed around to improve our breaths, not for ourselves, but for one another. You seek to make other people look good, and sometimes that begins by just protecting them from the smell of the garlic or the nicotine or whatever substance might be on your breath before the show. In improv, you must look out for your scene partners if the show is going to succeed, and that begins with selflessness, because the audience and fellow actors can tell if you're being selfish, and it ruins the entire experience. Del Close said this: "If the whole is to be art, the parts must not try to be." What he meant was, you can't be selfish. If you're going to make something together, if it's going to be a communal creation, you must be thinking about everyone else and not yourself. The jar is another common improv tool. You take suggestions from the audience and write them on slips of paper, or in class, the instructor writes down a suggestion, and you pull something out of the jar and roll with it. The start of your experience is completely out of your control. Those slips of paper represent the unknown that will come your way. They represent the fact that you must be ready to hear other people's voices, even if they are not what you wanted to hear. They exist. There they are in the jar. And by existing, they are important and they are full of potential. It's up to you to take it, accept it, and make something amazing. The last object on my altar is my diploma from one of my improv schools, and it hangs proudly in my office between my degrees from Baylor University and Princeton Seminary. This hangs there to remind me of the many nights that I drove an hour to a show only to sit in my car terrified of walking into a theater full of strangers. But every single time I was brave. I made myself go. And once I got on stage, there was a culture waiting for me. A culture of yes and. A culture of open, safe spaces. A culture of generous thinking. A culture of people ready to play. Some nights I returned to the car in humiliation because it was a silent audience and no laughter. Other nights I returned to the car elated because the room was full of laughter and congratulations after the show. But whether I was triumphant or failing, I never won or lost alone. I was part of a community of people who were there with me, failing or succeeding. And it was people who were willing to try, to set aside their own agendas, to let go of control, to say yes, and to create something new together. We created together a moment, a story, a new world, deep characters with backstories, adventures, jokes. And yes, they faded just as soon as they existed. But that temporary existence somehow made it more holy because it was something made together. It was something made through vulnerability. And it was something made by saying yes.